Hello.
So this is an unusual position for me to be in because I oversee something called Fortune Most Powerful Women. We had our big conference, which is about this size, in Washington, D.C. a few weeks ago. And having been involved in that over the last 17 years, I usually know the people I'm on stage with, and I just met these three guys in the green room. But I actually have long wanted to meet them all because Chip Bergh, the president and CEO of Levi Strauss, Fortune did a big story about a year ago. In fact, I was reminding Chip he knew. It was in our Most Powerful Women issue, actually, which is a good place to be because it's one of the biggest issues of the year.
But I didn't get invited to the party.
You didn't. We'll make it up to you. So Chip spent 28 years at Procter & Gamble, got recruited to be the new CEO of Levi Strauss in 2011. He has a bit of experience in selling to men because he headed male grooming at P&G, and that includes Gillette.
Right.
So, and Mark Bertolini, who I've wanted to meet for a long time because he just frankly has a great story, and he's made radical changes at Aetna, which he joined in 2003, and Mark became CEO in 2010 and chairman in 2011. And then Walt Bettinger, I feel like I've known so many people at Schwab over the years, and Walt has been there most of his career, ever since Schwab acquired his startup in Akron, Ohio in 1995, and that brought Walt into Schwab. He became CEO in 2008. I've read two different things, July 2008, or was it actually October 2008 that you became CEO?
I think it was when U.S. Treasury market locked up. I'm not quite sure. No, it was the fall. It was the
they
fall
called on Walt at that moment. And yeah, seriously, like the toughest time to be CEO. And Walt carried Schwab through the recession and has really transformed this company that had been resting too much on transactions and ever higher fees, and Walt has brought a much more sort of reliable and successful business model. So, first question for you guys: what is the best example in the last year or so of your leading your companies or building your strategy around purpose? Chip?
You're looking at me.
Sure.
So I guess just 2 or 3 bits of background. Levi Strauss is the original Bay Area startup. 162 years old and founded by Levi Strauss, the man himself. And the company really was founded on 2 things, innovation and purpose. And we continue to innovate today, and we continue to focus on driving our values. Probably the best example in the last year or two, we've had what we call terms of engagement. It's how we engage with our suppliers around the world, the people who are making our product. And for the first 22 years or so of this program, it was really on the bottom of the pyramid, as I like to say. It was focused on safety, it was focused on wages and hours and no child labor, basic bottom of the pyramid stuff that was getting companies in trouble back in the 1990s. We led, it became the industry standard. It was very contentious about driving costs up, but at the end of the day, it became the industry standard. And in the last 2 years or so, we've really pivoted that program from being bottom of the pyramid to focused more on what we're calling worker well-being. So we're actually working with factory owners to survey their workers to really understand what are their higher order needs that we can work with the factory owners on focusing on. And so examples are women's health. Most of the workers in this industry are women in third world countries. Women's health, financial literacy and financial education, teaching the workers how to save and then apply those savings to better their life and better their communities. And the Levi Strauss Foundation, which is kind of an arm of the company, funded this to build the business case to prove that this is a good thing for business. And we're now demonstrating for every dollar that we invest in these programs, there's a $3 return to the factory owners. So over time, they're going to pick it up on their own. Our goal is to have 80% of all of our products made in factories that have these worker well-being programs in place. And today it's about 15 factories, but over time that's going to grow.
15 out of how many factories?
A couple hundred.
Great. Mark?
We went on a journey a couple of years ago. Actually, it took 2 or 3 years to convince people on my team that it was a good thing to do, of understanding who are the lowest compensated employees in our organization. We had every year gone through this exercise of, I call terrorism of the spreadsheet, putting together the operating plan, where we would put numbers on the page, and every year we would tweak merit increase pool. And we'd say, we'll just make sure we differentiate when we hand out the raises, and that way we'll make sure that we use our money wisely. And as I wander through the organization, on every site visit I go on, I go to every cubicle, shake everybody's hands, say hello. I was hearing about how the merit budget got cut. And what was happening is, while a layer or two below me, we were actually compensating people on a differentiated basis. When it got down to the front line, the people would say those creeps in corporate cut the merit budget by 50 basis points, so everybody gets less. And what we were doing is slowly crushing the frontline employees of the organization by undercompensating them every year. So I said to the HR team, who are these people? What do they do? How are their lives? I was hearing anecdotes from each of them. And we found that of the lowest compensated employees in our organization, averaging about $12, $13 an hour, 81% were women. Most of them were single mothers. 30% of them had their children on Medicaid or an insurance company. And 20% of the families are on food stamps. And so I said, well, what do we do about this? And that began the inexorable battle inside the organization to come up with the right number. And of course, we wanted to run spreadsheet analyses and everything else. And what I finally said is, let's look at $16 an hour, because everybody was talking about 15, and let's see what that looks like. And when we looked at that analysis, we found two things. It wasn't that expensive. It was about 5,700 employees. That would get on average about 33% rate increase. But more importantly, what was happening is, as we raised wages, people lost benefits. Because in our organization, we grade our benefit contributions by compensation levels. The lowest level employees pay 0. I was paying 62% of my benefit structure. So we started looking at benefits and said, how can we instead increase wages, increase personal disposable income, so that these individuals can be vibrant contributors to the vitality of their communities? And that was to eliminate their cost sharing. So we came up with a program where it was $16 an hour on average, an average increase of 12%, some people 33%. And then we eliminated cost sharing for those individuals who would enroll in wellness, health risk appraisals, engage in all of our programs that were necessary. We would waive all of their out-of-pocket costs in exchange for their contributing to their own wellness. And that would impact 7,000 employees across the company. It will cost us about $27 million a year on a run rate basis. Our turnover costs are $120 million a year as a company. And then we went through the other terrorism of the spreadsheet. Well, how are we going to pay for this? And I first suggested, well, we can take it out of the long-term incentive pool of the executives. And then if we find it, we'll be able to put it back for you. But we're not going to lay it off on the rest of the organization. And we started looking at turnover, number one, engagement, number two. Our scores in that population this year are up 1,600 basis points on engagement. And then what do we do about productivity? Productivity's up across the organization for those individuals. And so we started coming up with these softer costs. And so instead of having a conversation about what is the truth, what are the right numbers on the page, it was really about what do we need to believe it could be in order to make this investment in our own employees.
Yeah, wow. And what about turnover? Are you noticing a change in employee turnover yet?
It's hard right now because the economy's so bad. People aren't leaving anyway. We hope that the turnover at that level will decrease. It's way early. But I can tell you the greetings I get in the hallways as I walk around the buildings, I've never gotten so many hugs and pecks on the cheek in the last 6 months than in my whole prior career. But folks are really excited about it.
It's really great. I mean, the ROI on that from the numbers you gave, 27 million versus 100 and, what are the
20
same?
million
120 million.
turnover costs. That's, rehiring, productivity, training,
Fantastic.
customer dissatisfaction, that sort of thing.
Okay, well, top that.
Well, I can already tell that I'm in the wrong business because we have Chip Casual, Mark Comfortable, Walt Starch. So right away, I already know I'm in over my head right here. The financial services industry, it's interesting when you talk about the link of strategy and purpose. We've done a pretty effective job in recent years, I think, of getting our trust level to where we're now, I think, one step below used car sales. So from our perspective, when you talk about linking strategy and purpose, to a great extent, it's the way we serve our clients. And in our business, for too many years, it's been viewed as a business where, from the company standpoint, heads we win, tails our clients lose. It's a difficult business in that, in many ways, even if you do everything that's right by the client, you can't assure the outcome is the one, at least from an investment standpoint, that the client is hoping for and anticipating. I think, stealing a page from what Chip mentioned, in our industry, Schwab is one of the original disruptors, consistent with some of the comments earlier, going all the way back to the slashing of brokerage commissions back in the mid-'70s with deregulation, and then opening investing to Main Street. But specific to your question, in the last year or two, one of the things that we did is we challenged ourselves around this sort of heads we win, tails the client loses notion, and decided that whenever one of our clients hires us to help them manage their investments, recognizing that building wealth is important from a societal standpoint, right? People that have a bit more affluence tend to be healthier, less reliant on government, more stable within communities. We decided that in any situation where a client was dissatisfied for any reason with the work that we would do, that we would refund 100% of what the client would have otherwise paid us. And just trying to break this cycle in our business, this reputation in our industry where we'll succeed whether the client is successful either. So that one stands out to me within the last year or two. And we found really fascinating take-up from clients with the recognition that we actually would put 100% of our revenue on the table sitting on the same side as them.
And how many clients have asked you for a refund?
Well, our enrollments in the last quarter in our advisory-based solutions where this applies are up over 50% from where they were a year before.
Terrific. And have you had any clients ask for refunds?
Well, sure, but incredibly small percent. Actually, what's interesting is simply, I think, being willing to maybe put our money where our mouth is puts clients in a situation where they have a more informed conversation. They know that we can't control the markets, but they know that we can assist in diversification and setting goal planning and making sure their costs are as low as they can possibly be so there's minimal drag on their results. But it just leads to a richer conversation because they know we're not in an adversarial place.
They trust you more, and they feel you're on their side. And did you pay out, though, in those cases?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Good.
Very, very small numbers, but absolutely. It's a no questions asked for any reason guarantee.
I'm going to turn to the audience right now. I have a few more questions, but if you have a question, please raise your hand. Wait for the mic handler. Identify yourself. Anyone have any questions yet? No? Okay. Well, then I will. Oh, right here.
So we're talking about disruption in
You
technology.
could identify yourself.
Oh, sorry, Michael Kaspar, World Fuel. For the gentleman from Levi Strauss, I'm sorry, I forgot your name.
Okay.
Are you using any supply chain certification? Are you using any technology to get the job done?
So we do, we audit all of our plants, all of the suppliers that make our product. They're audited on at least an annual basis. We do that internally. We think we set a very, very high standard, and I think our track record demonstrates that. But we don't use any outside services today.
Did any of you get good advice from mentors, from colleagues, in terms of making these changes that you have made? Walt, when you were deciding on this offer to clients, did Chuck Schwab have a view on this? Did anyone else advise you? Mark, you got a lot of pushback internally from your direct reports, it sounds like. Who did you, was someone sort of your true north, or was your true north inside you?
So on this specific circumstance, there wasn't a person that stands out, but on the general view, Chuck does stand out. I remember an example right around the time I became CEO, and we were faced with a very complex competitive issue, and we did the classic analysis. I think we had a 120-page PowerPoint, war games, if then, we'll do this, competitors will do that, we'll follow with this. And for those of you who know Chuck, know he's just an incredible gentleman. I sat down with him in his office, just the two of us, to go through this PowerPoint, and I got to about page 2 or 3, and I could see that Chuck was just chomping at the bit, and finally he stopped me and he said, "Walt, I'm sure this is great analysis. It's wonderful what we might do, what competitors might do, but let me ask you one question. If you were a client, which option would you go with? Is it A, is it B, is it C? If they had the full knowledge that you have about the industry, the business, how it works." And I said, "Well, that's obvious, it'd be A." And he said, "Well, then we don't need to go through any more on this deck. Competitors will do what they'll do, the market will do what it will do, but if you simply do what's right by the client and you believe in human nature, the goodness of human nature, that will be the winning strategy in the long run." And so I think that simple but crystal clear guidance has been something that we've utilized in every decision that we've strived to make.
That's fantastic. And Chuck Schwab is the chairman of Charles Schwab. Mark, what about you?
It was, in 2010, when I took on the role, I was at Harvard at a program called Higher Ambition Leadership, and it's about, there were 5 of us then, there are now 40 of us. Can corporations do good and do well? And is there a way to run a company differently? And I called Clay Christensen's office and said, "Do you just have a few minutes where I can wander in?" And I wandered in for a half-hour appointment, spent a couple of hours with him. And we started this journey of, when you're under a disruptive environment, the Affordable Care Act has disrupted healthcare pretty significantly, or at least it's frightened enough people to think it's going to be disrupted, what you do is you look at the current value chain, take the near and dear things that are positive for you as an organization, and repurpose them in what you think the new value chain will be. And the analogy you use is if your house is on fire and you can only run in and grab 2 things, which 2 things do you grab, and just let the rest burn?
Wow.
And so our view was that we had an opportunity to impact the 85% of our cost structure. 85% of our revenues go out the door to hospitals and physicians to provide health care, that we needed to find a way to impact that delivery of care in sufficient ways, using our data and our technology to help them understand how to change their revenue model to one of not fee-for-service, but value-based reimbursement, and to take that relationship that we had with providers and turn it around. And that's what we've done. We've invested about $4 billion over the last 5 years in that effort. On top
In which effort, exactly?
in actually building what I call health plan in a box. It's a franchise kit for health systems to take on risk and change their revenue model. And it's an integrated technology backbone with intellectual property that we actually give away to them in exchange for a fundamentally different economic relationship. That allows us then to put them in our business and put us out of it. And so we see the insurance business going away other than a fairly high level of sophisticated banking, and not really all that sophisticated, maybe even gambling. We actually insure bets. And so our job really is to manage that level of financing and allow the local health systems in the community to actually focus on improving the health of the population, which improves their productivity, which improves their economic and social viability, and makes that community happy. And that should be our definition of health, and we should reward the health system in that community for doing that. And the only way they can do that is if they're in our business and we're out of it.
Right.
So that's what we're in the process of doing, and that's been our investment for the last 5 years.
Okay. Yes, right here.
Sheeta Bina from Insigniam. As I hear you speak, I'm reminded of Peter Drucker's famous saying that culture eats strategy for breakfast. Well, there's a debate whether he said breakfast, lunch, or dinner. I say it's all three. And it seems to me that you each indicate how you impacted your culture through structure and practice in your initial stories. So my question would be, one, what do you see as the relationship between your cultures and your strategies? And second, what other levers and dials are you moving to be able to shape the culture and mobilize your workforce to realize your strategies?
In the last 5 years, we've done $49 billion worth of acquisitions, including the current acquisition we have underway. And those acquisitions have been focused first on whether or not there's strategic alignment between the organizations where we can agree on what the future looks like. But the most important aspect is when you get the teams together, do we have a cultural alignment that allows us to pursue that strategy together? Because culture does trump strategy every day. And if you can get those two to work, then the storming part of the relationship is, what does it cost? How are we going to do it? What are you willing to take, and what am I willing to spend to make that happen? But that has been our alignment every time. So we do not buy on the basis of size. We buy on the basis of whether or not there's strategic alignment with a level of capabilities that move us forward as an organization. And in 2010, we were a $30 billion company. And when we complete our latest acquisition, we'll be a $125 billion company over a period of 5 years, and significant in our space. And it's about that strategic alignment. So finding that alignment, making sure the culture support it, and then making the numbers work versus the other way around, which is a lot of how people pursue M&A. Yeah.
I mean, what I would say, so when I joined Levi Strauss about 4 years ago, the company's track record and history, we peaked in sales in the mid-90s. 1996, we were $7.1 billion in sales. At that point in time, we were bigger than Nike. Nike today has crossed $30 billion in sales. Levi Strauss went backwards from $7.1 billion in sales to $4.1 billion in sales. And then it kind of bounced around. 1 year it would grow the top line, but the bottom line would be down. They'd fix that the next year, but the top line would be down. So when I joined, the company had almost gone bankrupt a couple of years earlier. And there were two things that were really clear to me. Number one, the company didn't have a strategy. And putting a strategy in place is actually the easier thing to do. And number two, it had a culture of underperformance, not a culture of winning, not a culture of performance and accountability. And I can say it's a lot easier to implement a strategic change and get everybody kind of lined up in the right direction, rowing in the same direction, than it is to really impact culture. And I will be honest, I'm 4 years plus into it, and I'm still working on that. It's the hardest thing to do. And, but we're making a lot of progress, and I'm really pleased to say the last 3 years, we will have grown the top and the bottom line consecutively each of the last 3 years. The first time in 20 years that this company has done that. So,
can you share numbers? What your revenues were last year?
We were about $4.7 billion in sales last year. And currencies have had a huge impact, just like any global company, about $200 million off the top line this year. So, but we're growing and we're heading in the right direction. We're building share and the brand is back. I mean, importantly, job one was kind of reestablishing Levi's as the iconic brand that it was when I was a kid growing up.
And what about profitability? Can you say anything about that?
Well, we're even though we're a privately held company, we've got publicly traded debt, so everything's public.
Okay.
And we'll make about $500 million in EBIT, roughly a year this year.
And how does that compare with the previous year?
We're up pretty dramatically over the
Good.
last couple of years.
Good.
You can go look it up. It's all public.
Okay. Walt, any?
So I would just say I think that in our firm, culture has remained consistent. It's strategy that got off track. So, we couldn't do anything wrong around the time of the internet bubble. I mean, you showed up for work, people traded like crazy. Most of our revenue was trading, and it was easy to be very client-oriented when money rolls in the door and there are no challenges facing the business. But we got off track when the internet bubble burst and started nickel and diming, and I'm sure 1,000 little decisions that individually seemed okay, but when put together went against sort of this long-standing cultural view in the company of clients being first. And so for us, when we made a major turn was about 8 or 9 years ago when we put in place a really simple strategy that we call Through Clients' Eyes. And what it did is it empowered everyone in the company who already had that culture of client first, that each decision would be made by what would be right for the client. And so we were actually bringing strategy back to a culture that had remained intact, despite the fact that from a leadership and some decision standpoint, we had veered away.
One of the keys, I think, from interviewing lots of leaders over the last few decades, and this is increasingly true, one of the keys to leading with purpose is to actually be a very authentic leader with a story, so you can show your employees that you have kind of a sense of purpose really built into you. And I just want to ask this group, what in your personal experience, whether it's something from growing up or something from a life experience along the way, has made leading with purpose a personal thing for you?
I'm really, I guess in some ways, blessed. Since I graduated from college, I've worked only for 3 institutions, I would say they are. The U.S. Army, right after college for 4 years.
You were a captain in the Army.
I was a captain in the Army, 28 years at Procter & Gamble, and now 4 years at Levi Strauss. The Army's been around for about 250 years, roughly. Procter & Gamble is knocking on 179 years, I believe, and Levi Strauss 162 years. Wow. And the one thing that those 3 institutions have in common is a core sense of values and purpose that really binds the people inside the organization to that institution. And clearly I was shaped by the impact that those institutions had on me.
Mark?
My skill sets are built around building new things and fixing broken things. I'm not particularly interested in making the trains run on time. I hire people to do that, and I can know how to do it, but if you lead me to doing it, I will actually break it because I'll want to play with it. And so knowing that about myself and the people I'm connected with, I've been very connected throughout my career in turnarounds and startups. And they've progressively gotten bigger. I was invited to Aetna when we were losing $1 million a day in 2002. And so all of that skill set is really about being honest with people, accepting personal accountability and being selfless in making it better, promising transparency and fairness. And while people will initially dislike you, they actually will love you when you actually show them progress.
Yeah.
And I think we lose that in our political dynamic today. We don't have that kind of conversation. And if we did, we'd be a far better nation if people were just honest, accepted accountability, and said, here's how we move forward.
Mark, I know you're willing to talk briefly about this. I mean, you've had two very, very traumatic life experiences. I mean, Mark almost came very close to losing his teenage son, Eric, to cancer in 2001, and Eric is very successful today in the financial services industry, right? And in 2004, Mark had a terrible, terrible skiing accident and was given last rites and had a long and difficult recovery, and it changed the way you think about your own health and taking care of yourself. And I sense that it has affected the way you think of taking care of your employees.
Well, it's about fixing broken things, right? And so if there's a challenge and something's not right, what do we do to make it better?
Yeah.
Because that should be the legacy we leave behind, is that we've had an impact. And if we can say we've had an impact, it doesn't matter that your name's on a building or you've left money to people, you've actually changed something that was important.
Yeah. Walt, last word.
Well, I had an experience really at the end of my college career, which drove home that real success in business is about others, and generally about others who the world would see as the least among us, consistent with some of the things that Mark said. Not that is a correct view, but the world might see. In my last quarter of school, I had a night class in business strategy, and it came down to the final exam. I was probably the classic young person getting ready to get out of school, a bit arrogant. The world centered around me, proud that I'd gotten a job in a tough time in the early 80s, and about to close out a career with a 4-point grade point average, and everything revolved around that and my success. It came down to that final exam, and we had met maybe twice a week, 3 or 4 hours, 3 hours maybe at night each class. Teacher handed out the final exam after I'd put in many hours of studying for this capstone of my college success. And it was one piece of paper. I couldn't believe it. He said, wait till I hand it out to everyone before you turn it over. And then he said, all right, turn it over. And the other side was blank across both sides of paper. And he said, I've taught you everything I can teach you about business in the last 10 weeks except the most important thing. And he said, what's the name of the lady who cleans this building? We've been in here for 3 hours a night, 2 times a week for the last 10 weeks. And I failed that exam. I didn't get a 4-point. But the lesson I took away from not knowing Dottie's name is a lesson I've carried with me for the last 35 years. And I think that was a powerful lesson that I've carried throughout each stage of my career, constantly reminding myself, it's about others, it's about serving others, it's not about being served.
It's about people. Thank you, Walt. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Chip. Thank you all.
Great. Thanks a lot.